Hey everybody, welcome back to tutorial number 5 on building your email machine. So in today's episode we're going to talk about a number of different topics, and one of the most important topics we're going to talk about today is actually coding the machine so it can write your email. So we're going to show you how to write that email, how to include a CC line, a BCC line. We're going to show you how to make the entire email today. We're going to talk about different kinds of email bodies. How do you write the email body and how do you change the colors? We're going to talk about HTML. We're going to talk about the set statement in VBA. Very important. And we're also going to talk about early binding and late binding. And the difference is basically because you want to be able to write your code and then send it to somebody anywhere around the world so your tool will work. So we're going to show you exactly how to do that today through early binding and late binding. We'll show you how to write modules, create new modules, changing the name of modules, and referencing object libraries in order to write the code. We'll talk about leveraging the Intellisense, which is something that Microsoft builds into their VBA products to help you write your code better. So we'll show you exactly what that is. And then last, as a pro bonus tip, we're going to show you with statements in VBA and how to write your code in a really neat format. So this way it runs efficiently, it looks good, and it's easy to read, so you can later on go ahead and change it if need be. Okay, well, if you like today's episode, please remember to subscribe and smash that like button. And without further ado, let's get started. So now the question is, how do you actually use VBA, how do you actually use Excel to generate an email that opens up in Outlook? In other words, how do you use Excel to create an email in another program? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to learn how to do that today. So the first thing that we're going to do is, here's our tool, and we are going to go now. So now we're going to unhide all of the sheets in one shot, right? So here is our code to unlock and make all sheets visible. So we're going to go ahead and run that. Now let's make the VBA editor a little smaller here, and let's actually just go ahead and create a new module. So we're going to say new insert module, and module 1 really doesn't make much sense in terms of humans, and we want to be able to call our objects and code using language that we understand. So we're going to just call it the email. And so from this point on, this module will now be called the email. So there are really two ways for us to create an email. One is called early binding, one is called late binding. Now early binding allows us to actually use the Intellisense that we've been using. So let's go ahead. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to be showing you both, but we're going to begin with early binding, which means we need to activate the object library for Outlook. So we're going to go to Tools, References, then we're going to scroll all the way down looking for the latest version of the Microsoft Outlook 16.0 object library, and you might have 15, or depending upon when you see this video, it might be at 17 or 18 or even higher, but go for the latest Microsoft Outlook object library. You're going to activate that, and then you're going to say OK. Now what this does is it activates the object library. So this way, when we call upon objects and we want to create objects that are related to the Outlook application, Excel knows what to do. It also allows us to use the Intellisense, which allows us to write the code a little faster. So you may be thinking, well,
if I send this tool to other people, are they going to have to go to tools and then reference and then activate that objects library? The answer is no. For our purposes right now, we're going to be using the objects library to help us write the code. And that's what early binding is really about. Early binding is allowing us to reference the objects library for another application, but later on we're going to convert the code that we write, so this way later if we send the code to somebody else, or we're working on a computer that didn't activate that, we won't have that problem. We won't actually have to activate the library. So let's begin. So we have a new module, the email. Let's begin creating the first sub. So we're going to call this the Outlook email. And for our purposes, we're going to call this, we're going to add a comment, early binding, because we've activated the object library for Outlook. Now, to actually use Outlook, in other words, we're writing within Excel. We want to use Excel, we want to use VBA to call upon another app, another application. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin by declaring, like we did before. We have a data type or we have an object. We want to declare what that object is. We're going to declare, we're going to make this up, and again we can call this variable anything we want. We're going to call it Outlook app, so OLAPP, as. Now notice the Outlook application, or I should say the Intellisense, is now coming up, and I can go ahead and I can just start writing Outlook dot application, and will give me the available procedures, actions, constants. It will just help me write the code. If I did not activate the objects library, that would not come up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to show you what I mean. I'm going to go back to tools, I'm going to go back to references, I'm going to unselect that, and let's go ahead and let's try if we can do this again. Dim OLAPP, Outlook application, as Outlook dot, and notice the Intellisense is no longer working. It worked up until a point, but it's not, now it's not calling upon the Outlook application, so it's not going to work. So I'm going to go back now. I'm going to reactivate the Outlook library. So we're going to go back. Let's look for the Outlook library. There it is. And here we go. So now let's begin. Dim. Again, we're declaring what the variable is going to be. We're declaring that every time we say or we write OLAPP Outlook application, it's going to be referring to the Outlook application. Now that's the whole application. There's a whole bunch of functions and different items within that application and actions that we could use Outlook to do. So within Outlook, do we want to create an invite? Do we want to create a calendar item? No. What we want to do is we want to create an email item. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to say dim the email, and again that's going to be my variable. My variable is going to be the email. The email as Outlook dot, and notice it gives me all of, every time I say Outlook, it knows I'm referring to something within Outlook. I want to do something with the Outlook application. Again, if I didn't activate the library, it wouldn't do this. So it's giving me everything that I can do within Outlook. And so I can go through this, and you may want to just go through this one day. Look at this. You have contact items. So you can create a contact item. You can do a whole bunch of things. What we want to do is we want to create a mail item. So every time we want to refer to the whole Outlook application, we're going to say OLAPP, Outlook application. And every single time we refer to the actual email item, not just anything within the app, but the actual email, the variable is going to be the email. So now I want to teach you something new. Before we were just declaring, we would say that the dim means that we're declaring a variable, a data type. And then we would go ahead and we can just say what the variable actually means, right? So we could say we're dimming dim x as integer. And then what integer is it? Well, x equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But when you want to declare actually what a object is in Outlook, you have to use the word set. So instead of just saying x equals, we're going to use the word set. So we're going to say exactly what OLAPP means. So first what we want to do is we want to make sure when Excel knows to use the Outlook application, it's going to see if there's already an instance of the Outlook application already open. So what we want to do is we want to say OLAP equals new Outlook.application. Now by doing this, it's not going to create a new instance of the application every time. It's just going to check to see if there's already an instance. If it's already there, it's not going to create again and again and again. The second time we're going to use set, and the second time we're going to declare what the object is, we're going to set the email to equal, first we're going to begin with the application, so we know that it's the Outlook application, and we want the email to not just be any item, but we want it to be the application that creates an item. And again, take a look, it's going to give us what parameters are available. So the email is going to mean within the Outlook application, create an item and create an email item. And so if I go ahead and run this code, it's really not going to do anything. It's going to activate and start an instance of Outlook if it's not already open, but it is open on my computer right now. But you're still not going to actually see the email item. You're actually not going to see the email. What we really want to do is we want the email to be seen, obviously. So here's how we're going to see the email. The email is the email dot, and now here is the action that we wanted to take, display. So now if we go ahead and we run the code, there's our email. So now I could go ahead, I could create a button. The button would start this sub and the email would come up. Just these 5 lines of code would be sufficient to start the email. Now let's go ahead and let's actually build out the email. Now the email has to have a to, right? So we want to say the email dot, and if you go ahead and you look and you will see to. And now I can call it anything I want. Richard at officesuperhero.com. Now let's run the code. Let's see if this comes up. And there you go. And like magic, and really smart, the other actions that you could take would also be CC. So if you needed to CC somebody, and again, you can go through all of this and you can see all the different actions and functions that you could take with this email. So we can call it CC equals, and I'm just going to call it anything. We could just say CC list for now. That's not a real email address, but Outlook won't be checking right now. We can have a BCC. If you wanted to, you could add a BCC in there. And if you wanted to keep the line of code in there, but you want to keep the line of code in there, but you don't actually want to use it right now, sometimes you just don't want to forget that it's available, you can just go ahead and leave it like this. You can say the email.bcc equals, and then it's just blank. So let's try this now. And again, you can see how it worked. So now let's try another one. So we can say the email dot subject equals the test of the email rocket tool. And let's see if that works. And there you go, it worked. And now you need the body of the email, the actual text. So we can say the email dot, and here's where it gets a little tricky, because there's different kinds of body. We have body, or we have HTML body. For our purposes right now, we're going to just stick with body. So let's just take a look at what body means. So we can say the email.body equals, this is a test to see if the email works. Try it again. And notice that the signature is no longer there. We're going to come back to how we can bring that back. Now there's different types of body formats. So we can say the email dot body format, and watch, the Intellisense brings up different kinds of text formats. So we can say format HTML, plain, rich text, or unspecified. For us, we're going to leave it like this with the HTML, which is typically the default. And let's run the code again. And so you can see in reality, it did write HTML here. So we know that it is HTML. But the signature is still not there. So how do we make the email so we still see the signature? So this is what we're going to do. The first thing is we're going to move this line of code up to here. So let's do that. Let's cut, bring it up here. Okay, and the order of how these are presented can mean a lot. So just keep that in mind. So if you're ever having difficulty or something's not displaying correctly, I would strongly suggest that you go ahead and change some of the order, and you'll find that sometimes things work. But let's go ahead, let's try this. Now it's still HTML, but it didn't bring back the body or the signature. So how would we do that? So another type of body text is not just body.body, but it's HTML body. And we can run the code again, and it still didn't make much of a difference. So here is the advantage of using HTML body, is that when you are using HTML body as the type of body, you can actually write a HTML code. What we want to do is we want to say this is a test to see if the email body works, and what the existing body of the text already was. The existing text of the body was already the email.html body. So let's see if this now works. Notice we have the body, but it's still not working. So what we're going to do is we're going to do two things. This is our HTML code. We're going to add a line break. To do a line break, we're going to add another ampersand. And this is how you do a line break. Like this. Okay. And let's try it one more time. Still nothing. It didn't work. Here is the reason. The culprit is right here. We need to move this down. So let's cut this and let's put it after the body format. Now watch what happens. And there we go. So here we have the body of the text that we wanted, the new text, and here is our signature. So let's continue. Now remember, what we really want to do is we really want this tool to work on anybody's computer or any computer that we want it to work on. So what we talked about before was early binding and late binding. We're going to now copy this code and we're going to convert it to late binding. So we're going to call this the Outlook email, and we're going to underscore late, and now we're going to call it late binding. And this is how we convert to late binding. And once it's converted to the late binding, then you could run this code on any computer. So basically, we want to create a tool so this way we don't have to go to references or ask our users, go to the reference library and activate and check off Microsoft Outlook. For some people, that would be very, very difficult. Basically, you want to create a tool where you're just able to use it as long as Outlook and Excel are on the computer. So we need to convert this to a code so it can be used on any computer. So this is how we're going to do this. The first thing is the Outlook application is a direct reference to the object library, and we don't want that. What we want to do is we want to convert this first to object. So we don't want to call upon the object library when we don't want to check it off. So we want to just call it a general object. And the same thing here. We don't want to use Outlook mail item because, again, we're not going to be referencing the Outlook library. So we're going to call that an object. Now, the next thing we want to do is we're not going to be able to use this again because we're referring to the object library. We need to just draw upon the general VBA library. So instead of saying new Outlook application, this is a general create object. And we're going to pass in the actual parameter, the actual item that we want to create. We're going to pass it in through Outlook, and we're going to call it Outlook application. Okay. So now we've partially changed what we need to change. What we're going to do here is we still have it checked off. So we're going to go back to early binding, and we need to find the different codes for these other items, such as OL mail item and OL format HTML. So let's go back to the early binding. Let's step through it. And again, I'm pressing F8 each time. Is this working? Yes. Now, let's take a look. See this over here? We can leave this portion, but we need a number reference. And how do you get the number reference? Put your cursor, go through it step by step with F8, put your cursor over it, and there it is. So we're going to convert this to a number. So we don't actually want to change this one, though. We want to keep this as the same. So we're going to convert this one to 0. Let's continue. This one is number 2. So we go down over here. We're going to convert that to number 2. And let's see if this still works. Ended. And here is our email. So now we've converted the early binding to late binding. Let's go ahead. Let's remove the check. So now we're not going to be referencing the library. And look what happens to the one we were just working on. We didn't change it. This is the early binding. It runs in runtime error. It's not going to work any longer because we're not referring to the object library. But this one, so I'm going to stop it. But this one, let's take a look. No error. And look at that. So it completely worked. So running this code, I'm going to click this away. I'm going to try it one more time. This code will now run on anyone's computer, and you don't have to tell them to check off the library, the Outlook library. So from this point on, we're going to be using the late binding code. Now let's clean this up a little bit. When I write code, I really like it to be very, very specific. I like to refer to a specific sheet. I like to call it out every time. But to save a little bit of space so we don't have to keep writing the same thing, instead of writing the email dot body format, the email dot display, the email, this is a very common coding style in VBA. Instead of writing so many times, what we can do is we can write with the email. Then we can take away all of these other times that we're referring to the email. And then we close it, and with. We can even indent this to make it a little neater. Okay. And now let's try it one more time. Let's see if it works. And there you go. So using with is a very, very common way of avoiding the need to write the variable multiple times when you're going to be referring to it multiple times. Now the question becomes, how do we, I'm going to go back to our email tool, how do we make this is the actual body of the email, how do we put this body of the email and this subject into this email? How do we use this code to actually write the email? We're going to leave that for the next tutorial.